If you've never been a key, you probably think we're all the same, cold, silent, and a little bit boring. But let me tell you, there's a whole world you've never seen, right under your nose, in the pockets and purses and junk drawers of America. My name? Well, I used to be called the front door key. But that was a long time ago, back when I belonged to a man named Jack Turner. He lived in a little blue house on Maple Street, and I was the one thing standing between his family and the wild, unpredictable world outside. I remember the day I was lost like it was yesterday, even though, in key years, it's been a lifetime. It was a Saturday, the kind where the sun is so bright it makes the sidewalk shimmer, and Jack was running late for work. He tossed me into his jacket pocket, the one with the hole in the lining, and sprinted out the door. I felt myself slip through the fabric, tumbling into the unknown, landing with a metallic clink on the sidewalk. I waited for him to notice, to come back for me. But he never did. That's how my adventure began, alone, forgotten, and lying face up on the concrete, staring at the sky. For a while I just lay there, watching sneakers and boots and the occasional paw pass by. I learned a lot about people from that vantage point. Some folks walk with purpose. Others shuffle like they're carrying the weight of the world. Kids skip. Dogs sniff. And every once in a while, someone stops to tie their shoe and glances right at me, but never picks me up. I started to wonder if I was invisible. Then, one afternoon, a little girl named Emily spotted me. She was maybe 6, with wild curls and a gap-toothed smile. She scooped me up and held me to the sunlight, squinting as if she could see my whole story written in my scratches. "Look, Mom, a magic key!" she shouted. And for a moment, I felt important again. But her mother was in a hurry, tugging her along, and I was dropped into the depths of Emily's backpack, wedged between a half-eaten granola bar and a crayon with no wrapper. That backpack was a world of its own, sticky, colorful, and always in motion. I traveled to school, to the park, even to a birthday party where I was briefly used as a pretend sword in a battle between 2 plastic dinosaurs. I started to think maybe this was my new purpose, to be a treasure, a secret, a piece of someone's childhood. But, as kids do, Emily moved on. One day she cleaned out her backpack and tossed me into a box labeled, "Junk Do Not Touch." And there I stayed for what felt like years, listening to the muffled sounds of life outside my cardboard prison. Time is strange when you're a key. Days blur into nights, and you start to wonder if you'll ever feel sunlight again. But just when I'd given up hope, the box was opened by a teenager named Ben, Emily's older brother. He was looking for something else, but his hand closed around me, and I felt a jolt of possibility. Ben was different from Emily, quieter, always lost in thought. He slipped me into his pocket and carried me everywhere, spinning me between his fingers when he was nervous, which was often. With Ben, I saw a different side of the city. We rode the subway, wandered through crowded streets, and sat on the steps of the library while he read thick books with complicated titles. Sometimes he'd talk to me, not knowing I was listening. "Wish I had a key to figure things out," he'd mutter. And I wanted to tell him that sometimes even keys don't know what they're supposed to unlock. One rainy night, Ben was caught in a downpour. He ducked into a coffee shop, shivering, and reached into his pocket for change. That's when I slipped out, falling to the tiled floor with a soft ping. He didn't notice. I watched him walk away, his shoulders hunched, and felt a pang of loss. I was alone again, but this time I was inside. A new world, full of possibilities and dangers I'd never imagined. The coffee shop was a place of stories. People came and went, each with their own secrets and sorrows. I was kicked under a table, swept up by a broom, and nearly thrown away, but fate had other plans. One morning, a barista named Lisa found me while cleaning. She was the kind of person who saw meaning in everything: a feather on the sidewalk, a penny on the ground, a key with no lock. She slipped me onto a chain and wore me around her neck, calling me her lucky charm. With Lisa, I traveled farther than I ever had before. She took me to art galleries, music festivals, and even on a road trip to Chicago. I dangled against her heart, feeling the rhythm of her life, the ups and downs, the laughter and the tears. She believed I brought her luck, and maybe I did. She got a new job, made new friends, and fell in love with a musician named Tyler. For a while, I was part of their story, a silent witness to their late-night talks and whispered dreams. But luck, like keys, can be lost. One evening, at a crowded concert, Lisa's chain broke. I fell to the sticky floor, trampled by dancing feet, and was swept away by a janitor who didn't believe in lucky charms. He tossed me into a box of lost and found items where I sat among forgotten sunglasses, single gloves, and a wallet with no ID. I started to wonder if I'd ever find my way back to a door, to a purpose. Was I just a piece of metal, or did I still matter? That's when I met someone who would change everything. A man named Frank, who worked nights at the coffee shop. He was older, with kind eyes and a habit of talking to himself. One slow night, he found me in the lost and found box and slipped me into his pocket, whistling a tune I'd never heard before. Frank didn't have much, but he had stories. He'd sit on the back steps during his break, smoking a cigarette and telling tales about the city, about lost loves, missed chances, and the strange magic that sometimes found its way into ordinary lives. He called me lucky, and for the first time in a long while I felt like I belonged. But the city is always moving, always changing. One night, Frank was mugged on his way home. The thief took his wallet, his watch, and me. I was tossed into a storm drain, swallowed by darkness, and carried away by rushing water. I tumbled through pipes and tunnels, battered and bruised, until I washed up in a place I'd never seen before. The heart of the city, where the lost things go. And that's where my real adventure began. If you've never been to the heart of a city as a lost key, you can't imagine the chaos. Down there, beneath the streets, is a world built from everything people forget. Buttons, coins, broken toys, a single red sneaker, and me. Just another piece of someone's past. For a while, I lay in the damp darkness, listening to the distant rumble of subway trains and the drip of water echoing through the tunnels. I wondered if this was it, if I'd finally reached the end of my journey. But the city has a way of stirring things up. One morning, a group of kids exploring the storm drains found me. They were city kids, tough, curious, and always looking for adventure. One of them, a boy named Marcus, picked me up and grinned. "Hey, check it out! Maybe it opens a treasure chest." For a moment, I was a pirate's key, unlocking imaginary riches in the flickering light of a flashlight. Marcus took me home, and for a few weeks, I lived in his pocket, jangling with loose change and a lucky marble. He tried me in every lock he could find. His front door, his bike, even the padlock on his dad's old toolbox. None of them fit, but that didn't stop him from believing I was special. He wore me on a string around his neck, showing me off to his friends, spinning stories about secret doors and hidden rooms. But as summer faded, Marcus's interest waned. I ended up in a drawer with old batteries and tangled headphones, forgotten once again. Time passed. Seasons changed. I listened to the sounds of life outside, a baby's first laugh, a couple arguing, the distant wail of sirens. I started to think maybe my story was over, that I'd just fade into the background, another lost thing in a city full of them. Then, one cold winter night, the power went out. The whole apartment building was plunged into darkness. Marcus's mom, searching for candles, opened the drawer and found me. She turned me over in her hand, frowning, And then something strange happened. She gasped, her eyes wide. This looks like Jack's old key, she whispered. Jack. The name sent a jolt through me. Could it be? Was this the same family I'd started with all those years ago? She hurried to a box in the closet, rummaging through old photos and letters. There, at the bottom, was a faded envelope with Maple Street written on it. She held me up to the light, comparing me to a tiny, worn photo of a blue house. Tears filled her eyes. I can't believe it, she said softly. After all these years. The next day, she took me to an address I hadn't seen in what felt like a lifetime. The blue house on Maple Street was still there. A little older, a little more worn, but still standing. She knocked on the door, and an elderly man answered. Jack, older now, but unmistakable. When he saw me, his face broke into a smile that was half disbelief, half pure joy. He took me in his hands, turning me over, tracing the familiar grooves. I thought I'd lost you forever, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You were the key to everything. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't just a piece of metal. I was a link, a connection between past and present, between people and memories, between what's lost and what's found. I'd been a part of so many lives, carried so many hopes and dreams, and now, at last, I was home. But here's the thing about keys. We're never really done. Even as Jack slipped me onto his key ring, I knew that someday I might be lost again. Maybe I'd find my way into another pocket, another story, another adventure. That's the secret we keys keep. We're always searching for the next door, the next chance, the next beginning. So if you ever find a key lying on the sidewalk, don't just walk by. Pick it up. Hold it to the light. Listen closely. You might just hear a story waiting to be told. A story about loss and hope, about journeys and homecomings, about the magic hidden in the most ordinary things. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, you'll find that the key you've been searching for was right there in your hand all along.